Hey beautiful people, and welcome back to Paragon. Today we're going to be covering general deck building tips that will hopefully help beginner and intermediate players to build decks quickly and efficiently. If you go on to find this video helpful, please leave a like and a comment and consider subscribing for more Paragon content. But with that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so to start off, let's talk about some cards that you may want to use when actually starting a match. When starting the game, we have 3 points to spend, and using these points properly can help us get a good start in a match. For example, if we're playing as a jungler, we want to clear camps as quickly as possible, so we get as much XP and CXP before the 3-minute mark so we can plant harvesters. Most of the time it's more beneficial to not take a key to start with, but instead increase your damage so that you can quickly clear 2 to 3 camps, get another 3 points, and then get a key. When I start as Chimera, I take a jungle drink and 2 strike tokens. This way I can unlock my unleash ability, maximizing my attack speed and doing more damage while using my drink for regen and extra damage. This way I can clear camps quickly, back at 3 points, and make it to the first harvester as it spawns. When looking at laners, things are a bit different. We need to make sure that we can easily get last hits while making sure that we can stay in lane as long as necessary. When I start as Murdoch while solo queuing, I take 2 cast tokens and a health potion. When I'm duo queuing with my buddy Freak, we tend to play Ranger and Support, and the support starts with a circlet of health. So I don't take my health potion, I instead take 3 cast tokens. This gives me a lot of extra damage early on to get some good poking damage on the enemy heroes, while making last hits so much easier. When laning, I generally use the rule of thumb to not back until I get at least 6 card points, because then we can make some cheap cards, but we'll discuss cheap cards in a minute. If we were playing a caster like Gideon, you are probably a lot better off to actually start with a cast token, a health pot, and a mana pot. Or if you're lucky enough to have them, just a cast token and 2 mana pots, or a health potion and 2 mana pots. As a support, like I already mentioned, I would start with Circlet of Health. It helps a lot in the early game to give your ranger that you're keeping alive sustain and keep them in lane longer to get more last hits, get you both more CXP, and generally end up ahead of your enemy. Okay, so hopefully that helps a bit. Just remember that the examples that I've given are simply examples that work for me. Always experiment to find what works for you. Now, before we actually talk about building decks for specific heroes, let's cover a great way to get an early game advantage when building a deck, and that is cheap cards. When I build my decks, I try to use as many of my 1-cost upgrade cards towards making cheap cards that are quick to complete. Pretty much always make them 6 points, but even a 7-point card can work really well. Let's take these 2 Staff of Adamants for example. Let's say that I'm laning against an enemy hero that is exactly the same as me. We're hitting just as many last hits as each other. We both back at 6 points. I decide to make a 6-point Staff of Adamant, and he decides to go into his 12-point Staff of Adamant. Okay, so straight off the bat, we're both going to get 6.5 energy damage and 100 health. So that's 3 of our 6 points spent. I'm going to use my next 3 points to put 3 minor casts on, giving me an extra 19.5 damage, while also finishing the card and giving me an extra 13 damage. So when I back with 6 points, I will fully complete my card to get myself 100 health and 39 damage. If my opponent is using the 3-point upgrades, and they back at 6 points, they will be getting the 6.5 initial damage, 100 health, and they will only be getting 1 of their upgrade cards, so they will be getting 19.5 damage. Now that 19.5 damage from that 1 upgrade equals the same amount as my 3 1-point upgrades. But the difference is that he's still 6 points from finishing his card. So by backing at 6 points and building his card this way, he would end up with 100 health and 26 damage. Whereas, as I stated before, I would have 100 health and 39 damage, which is a difference of 13 damage. Now that in the early game is massive. Now the same applies for any card in the game that has a fully upgraded bonus. Take a tempered plate for example, a really good way for a jungler to get a bit of a step up on his opponent when it comes to another physical hero is to take a tempered plate and add 3 lesser healths. This will mean that he will end up with 66 physical armor and an extra 400 health. At an early point of the game, when everyone's only got 6 points to spend, regardless of whether they spec into damage or not, they're generally not going to be breaking the 66 damage mark. So your 66 physical armor and 400 health will mean that they will barely graze you while you are still doing a decent amount of damage, and you will more than likely take them down before they've even done half of your health. Now, when using these cheap cards, you have to remember that you can't reach 60 CP spent while using 6-point cards, so clearly we'll be replacing them with stronger versions later in the game. So maybe later on in the game, when we back with another 6 points, we might replace this Staff of Adamant with this Staff of Adamant. So hopefully that makes sense. I want to leave the cheap card topic there, as I'm sure it's not too hard for you to grasp the advantages between these two different cards, but just experiment with what you've got. I know that it's not easy to actually make these 6-point cards because it's dependent on what upgrades you actually have. So if I was to it's dependent on what upgrades you actually have. Obviously, it's not going to be easy for everyone. If you look here, I actually only have 3 minor casts, I only have 3 lesser healths. I don't have any lesser guards or minor guards. They aren't easy to come across. When you do get them, they are huge in card packs, as they will help you quite a lot building any deck. 1-point casts and lesser healths are huge. They're great cards to get in card packs, so hopefully the luck is with you and you get yourself a few. So now we need to talk about how to build a deck that suits your chosen hero. Okay, so obviously with Murdoch, for example, we want to be building a lot of damage. It's easy to understand how you want to build Murdoch, so we won't talk about Murdoch so much. We'll make another deck and look at someone that's not so clear cut on how to build him. This is one of my favorite heroes, Narbash. Okay, so if we take a look at my Narbash deck really quickly, because it's going to be very hard to explain with a pre-built deck, but you'll notice that I have a Circlet of Health for the start of the game. I do actually have these guys here, but they're just in case I want them at some point. Generally, I'm not doing a lot of damage, so I take the Centurion card because it's not my job to do damage. Okay, so I have an early game Adamant Edge with 3 lesser healths. That ends up giving me 19.5 damage and 400 health, which is huge. Then I have an Amulet of the Veteran with 3 minor strikes. So I'm getting an extra 300 health, and I'm getting an extra 26 damage. So the way that this deck actually works is that I end up running it with a 12-point Amulet of Veteran for a lot of health. I have 2 12-point resistance cards, a Spike Bone Plate and a Thorn Greenweave. I then have a 9-point Pendulum of Lords to give me 20% cooldown reduction. I have a Fountain Spike for a little bit of extra damage and some mana. And then I have a 6-point Brawler's Ward which stays on. Okay, so the whole point of this build is that I'm a support. It's not my job to do damage. I do have a little bit just in case I have to clear a wave a little bit, or just to help do a little bit of damage to an enemy hero to ensure that they don't get away. But the main focus is staying alive and having my abilities faster. If we take a look at my Lieutenant Smelly Fart build, you'll notice something sort of similar. Because she has intellect and order, I'm able to use Aetherweave Mash and Quantum Casing. Now these 4-point resistance cards come with stock 10% cooldown reduction when fully upgraded, so I get 20% cooldown reduction just by having them. I run myself a 10-point Elder Mage Amulet, and I run 2 10-point Amp Crystals. That gives me a lot of free mana. Okay, I have a Wellspring Staff, a couple of cheap cards. Okay, one thing you'll notice is that I'm actually running 10-point cards in this. This is just how I found that this build works out better for me. Generally, running 10-point cards is not the best way to go. Clearly, when going for 60 points in a build, you have many different options. You can build 6 10-point cards, you could build 2 12s and 4 9s, you could build 3 12s, 2 9s and a 6, you can build 4 12s and 2 6s. The math works out a lot of different ways, but generally keeping them in multiples of 3 will always be your best bet. It's a lot easier to finish off cards if you're running, for example, 2 12-point cards and 4 9s, rather than running with 6 10s. But if you want to run with 6 10s, that is fine. The one thing you want to make sure that you do not do, which I see a lot of people doing, is to actually run 5 12-point cards, so they're not using all 6 of their card slots. Yes, you technically have 60 points, and you're doing nearly as much as someone else, but someone has that exact same build. Let's just say, for example, your entire build was amp crystals. Okay, as far as upgrades go, we would both have the exact same amount of damage, mana, whatever we're using, but because you're not using that extra card, you are not getting the 6.5 damage and 75 mana at the start of the card, and you're not getting the 150 mana at the end of the card, so you're at a disadvantage. So let's actually go ahead and build a deck for someone. Okay, let's just take a look at Steel. He's a good beginner fighter, he has a lot of crowd control, and he's a very, very good support character for someone like Murdoch. We would probably build him tanky, as in this meta tanky unfortunately works at the moment. Pretty much every deck you see has health and resistance in them, so we'll go with the Centurion Prime card. Okay, now the first thing we want to do is we know that we want health, we know that we want armor. Okay, so let's go with armor first. Alright, we have a bunch of different options. If we just go for energy armor first, a Golden Veil, which comes with energy armor and crit chance, we're not going to be focusing on damage, and we don't want crits. So that's a no. Tune Barrier is definitely good. Thermo Bond, while burning, gain 110 physical armor and energy armor against critical strikes. Not a very good card to choose in the current meta, because not a lot of people actually use crits, and technically the burning is only applying to Iggy, so it's a very specific card that we won't be wanting to use. You then have Genesis Torch, which gives you a little bit of pen, some energy armor and cooldown reduction, not too bad. We then have Bubble Tap for lifesteal and energy armor, and consume 100 mana to shield yourself for 75% of current mana for 3 seconds. That's not too bad, it's a bit expensive for that, but we're going to go with Aetherweave Mesh, okay, and we're going to build it as a 12-point card. Okay, so because it already costs 4, we have 8 points to spend. So what we're going to do is we're going to use either 2 Divine Barriers or Greater Barriers. They're both the exact same thing, and then a barrier. Okay, so now we have got 10% cooldown reduction and a heap of armor. So then we're going to get our physical armor, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go for Quantum Casing, because there are only options. Once again, we don't want crit chance. That is a good option, but being intellect, I tend to find that Quantum Casing is a lot better for a hero that relies on their abilities. So once again, we're going to go with either 2 Divine Guards or 2 Greater Guards. They're the same thing, and a guard. Okay, so we have our 2 12-point resistance cards. Then we need to have a little bit of health. Okay, so we're going to go with an Amulet of the Veteran. It's one of the best health cards. You get an extra 300 health. And we're going to go with 3 greater healths. Okay, so we now have 3 12-point cards. The way that I generally look at it now is that I'm probably going to go with, I'm going to use 2 9s and a 6. So what we really need is we need to get some mana, and anything else can go towards damage. Okay, so if we have a look at the mana cards that are available, there are a bunch of things. This is probably actually your best option. You're going to get 225 mana for free. So what you could do is take something like that, or Fountain Spike is the other way around, to give you extra physical damage. So what I would probably go with is a Mutagem with a 3, 2, 1. to make it 9. What I would generally do is go for another mutagen, but I don't have one. So we will just go for a Fountain Spike, and we will add a Major Strike, a Mana, and a Minor Strike. Okay, so we've got a good amount of free Inspect into Mana, and we have 6 points left. One of the best things to do right now is to go for a Brawler's Ward, okay, and just put 3 Minor Strikes in it. Okay, that is actually a really good deck that will work really, really well, but it's not exactly fleshed out. So what I would do is, for my early game card, considering I'm going to be working with a carry, I would use a Circlet of Health, chuck a bunch of basic mana on it. It doesn't have a fully upgraded bonus, so you don't actually have to put these on, but if you find you're running out of mana, you've got them there that you can use. Okay, another thing that you could do, which I do on my Narbash deck, is to make a early game Pendulum of Lords. Okay, so we've got 2 basic Chronos and a mana that we can put on there. We also have 3 lesser healths, so we can make ourselves another Amulet of the Veteran with 3 lesser healths. Okay, we've got a pretty decent deck right there. We've also got 3 slots left, so you can pretty much then add anything you want. What I would probably do is just in case, grab a Harvester Key, grab yourself a Shepherd's File, and maybe a Strike Token. Anything that you want at this stage, because as I said, I generally don't use these. But that's a really, really simple way to build Steel to make it effective. I don't really want to go over too many heroes right here. I just wanted to show you the general basics of how to look for what to build. Steel has a lot of durability. He's generally a very good crowd control hero. He doesn't have to do all the damage, so having his abilities on cooldown, off of cooldown as much as possible is huge. So that build will work really, really well. Okay, so that is pretty much everything that I wanted to cover for today. I hope that was easy to follow, and I really hope that you found it helpful. Just try to keep in mind, go for those cheap cards, 6-point cards. They will give you a huge advantage. Try to build your decks in multiples of 3 so that they're nice and easy to finish, because every time you back you will have 3 points, so you don't want to be going to put a 2-point upgrade on and then having 1 point left over. If you are going to build that way, maybe throw in some cast tokens or strike tokens, so when you do only spend those 2 points and you have 1 left over, you can use them. Build towards your hero. Make sure you're building towards their strengths and not their weaknesses. Don't try and make a hero better by getting rid of their weaknesses. Just try to build on their strengths and play around their weaknesses. And on top of that, make sure you start with something that is going to be helpful. Okay, I will be doing build videos as we go on. I'll start getting back into those build videos, but in the next couple of videos we'll probably be covering some laning tactics and jungling tactics, because I feel like there's a lot of brand new players that are starting that could really benefit from that. But that is it for today, guys and girls. As I said, I really hope you found that helpful. If you did, please drop me a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more Paragon content. As always, thank you so much for watching. I love your face, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.